Hey, howdy, fellow Whovians, and welcome to a celebration because it's the finale of season 1. Yay, finale. Excuse me, or excusez-moi, perhaps. Anyway, L on Z on the episode. Doctor Who, season 1, episode 8, our season finale for our new season 1, titled Empire of Death, written by Russell T Davies. And I gotta say, because I didn't know the episode title until I scrolled down to see the new episode when it was out and saw that it was called Empire of Death, and I'm just like, that is one of the most like metal names for episode of Doctor Who I've ever seen. So that and the Satan Pit back in the Tennant era is also, yeah, but Empire of Death feels like an unreleased Slayer album. I don't know. Yeah, it's just me. Anyway, great episode title. Just already 10 out of 10. I haven't even seen a frame yet. Because this episode does not have a cold open. It has a recap of, previously on Doctor Who, which you could skip. I watched it because why not? Yeah, like I said, no cold open, just, goes into previously on the opening credits and then picks up right back where we left off. In the previous episode, the Legend of Ruby Rose. Because again, Doctor Who has that tendency of not wanting to make things part 1 and part 2, but hey, that's fine. This is very much a 2-part episode. Anyway, I will disclaimer, my notes on this one are kind of sparse because this episode is insane in the best way possible. It's all over the place, and there was a lot to try and keep up with. So with that in mind, I know I want to watch this episode again. I really probably should have watched it again and a couple other episodes, and you'll see that. Yeah, this one's gonna. I won't say this episode broke my brain at times. It just offered up so much stuff of like, I need to go back and look at this and think about it and put a lot of things together. I'll give credit. This is not jumping ahead at all, but I will give a lot of credit to Davis on this one, for taking the time. It was brief, little explanations here and there, taking the time to kind of fill in to the audience, at least the audience that's trying to follow this, of exactly the mechanics of how all this stuff's working and what's happened throughout this season. One episode in particular becomes really, really important. And I appreciate Davis taking the time to do that, because in the Moffat era, we could have had all this stuff, but it would not have really been explained. Not satisfactorily. It would have been very hand-wavy or not addressed. Some of the things that Davies tackled in this episode in terms of mechanics of like what's actually going on, how's it happening, that kind of stuff. He doesn't spend too much time on it, like I said, just brief little tidbits. Anyway, like I said, my notes on this one are really sparse, so bear with me on this one. Because again, I'm writing things down as they happen without pausing the show, so I'm just briefly dashing notes while trying not to miss anything, because this episode moves pacing-wise very, very well. At least for most of it. We'll get to the ending, and that's different, and that's a good thing. We'll talk about that when I get there. Alright. So anyway, let's get going to this one. Yeah, this episode does not pull any punches off the bat, because basically it opens up, things start going down, and Sutekh just starts dusting people. Thanos style. Not with a snap, but and the dust effect looks different because it's more like turning people into sand. But it's close enough. I mean, I don't think it was an intentional reference in this case with Sutekh and the ties there. Although they make a really funny joke. I didn't write it in my notes, but I remember it. Because if you watched my last review of the previous episode, I did mention that I wanted to try, in between last week and this week, go back and watch Pyramids of Mars again, just for, fun, and to see if there'd be any reference or Easter eggs, that kind of thing. And oddly enough, in this episode, they don't show clips per se. I don't think they've used a full-blown clip. They used some stills, like, in the unit database somehow, because magic and because TV show. So, because yeah, I think it's Ruby that says something about, like, what's all the Egyptians, or Egyptian, like, motif or whatever like that, or stuff. I forgot how she phrases it. And the Doctor's simple one-word, quick, like, throwaway line is like, yeah, cultural appropriation. Very funny in that moment for the thing. If you, again, have seen the classic Who episode that introduced Sutekh back in the day, that's a pretty funny joke. But yeah, like I said, they don't pull any punches this one early out. Like, Sutekh just starts dusting people, including Kate Lethbridge Stewart, which that was the big one I wrote down. I was just like, okay, it's on now, because I don't know the extent of where this is going yet. So I got that down. Below that, I've got, and it kills Ruby's grandmother. I'm like, okay, so you're just killing off all the characters at this point. And sort of, we'll kind of trying to follow this chronologically. As all this is starting to go down, and Sutekh is just starting to dust people left and right, Doctor and Mel return down to the time window where Ruby's still at, in the kind of VHS-y, time window memory of what was it, December 24th, 2004, the night in question they were looking at a lot. Previous episode, the time window thing. Still open. Ruby's still down there. I believe it's snowing because, why not? And I think at this point, I didn't put in my notes, it's made pretty clear that Sutekh has got his influence into Mel and has corrupted her, or starting to. Like, it's a process. It goes on for quite a bit of a Mel kind of pressing back against Sutekh's sort of mental takeover thing. I don't know what you'd rather really call it, where people kind of get the zombie eyes and face and all that junk when they're fully possessed. But Mel's not there yet. She's kind of fighting it as best she can. At least it's portrayed that way, I think. Anyway, because I think by the time they get down to the memory TARDIS thing, that little subplot's already started in motion. But anyway, they get back down to the time window, and as I successfully predicted last week, yes, the TARDIS that's manifested, sort of, or the memory of a TARDIS that's manifested in the time window, is indeed what they use for an escape. And yes, as I called it successfully, it is indeed the memory TARDIS we saw in the 60th. Not the 60th episodes proper. I talked about this last week, but I'll go on again just for emphasis. The memory TARDIS was something they used during the 60th anniversary for little side stuff with previous Doctors and previous companions. They used it as like a bumper piece because they were reissuing some like classic episodes. I think on the BBC, the ITV players, where they were putting them out as part of the 60th. But the thing they were including with these little segments both before and after the episodes with former Doctors and companions on the memory TARDIS. And again, it was one of those concepts they introduced, like, this is interesting and cool. Is this ever going to, like, make any sense in any way? And then I talked about it last week about how the alleged leak of one shot in the trailer that showed the Doctor opening the doors, and the background is that background of the memory TARDIS, not the usual TARDIS. I had the whole discussion last week. And I always gave it the benefit of the doubt that people are freaking out too much of, like, they just put the wrong background plate in the thing. Because again, it would get corrected very quickly. As we found out this episode, nope, that was not a mistake. Well, yeah, it was a mistake in the sense that they put the wrong shot. They took a shot from the final episode and put it in the trailer, which I think is always a cardinal sin. But it's becoming way more common across multiple industries, television, film, even video games. Destiny did this, or has done this for a couple expansions in a row now, where in their marketing, like, which I generally stop looking at with a lot of things just because of this reason of, like, or sticking stuff from like near the end of the story into the trailer. Stop doing that stuff. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, making this video too long, but yeah, there's a lot of bad examples of that. Anyway, neither here nor there. We have our official introduction and use of the memory TARDIS in this episode, and it's pretty fun. So yeah, that was really great. I have a note. Because this ended up being two different moments in the episode. I didn't know it at the time, which is why I'm thankful I wrote this down with a question mark when I wrote it down. Because I believe shortly after we get with the whole memory TARDIS thing, I think the Doctor's addressing Sutekh here. Again, my notes are really sparse. I should really rewatch this and just further deep dive on some details. But we get our first kind of epic speech. I would think our first properly epic speech from the 15th Doctor. Again, question mark, because it starts that way. It doesn't really go on or have quite the same gravitas as we're used to from the, the Doctor monologuing kind of thing. Again, that's why I kind of put it first epic speech, question mark, because I'm like, does this count? Like, it's as close as we've seen yet, but I think there's something that comes later in the episode that definitely qualifies. So, anyways, after that, there's some discussion, and I didn't write down the exact reference, but this is the first of two callbacks to the episode 73 Yards, which we find out this episode was way more important than we all suspect. I think we all suspected something important was happening there, but we didn't know what. A lot of that gets explained in this episode. And then, yeah, at that point, after that reference, that's when we're at the point where the whole Earth is dusted. And that's when I have a little arrow next to Earth dash universe, because I think this is a scene where they're going around, I think, in the chart, like looking at the, universal map, I guess, probably it's in the TARDIS, the star chart kind of thing. Or whatever display they pull up. And they're just seeing, like, they're naming off all these different planets. If you know your Doctor Who history, it's like, boop, boop. And the one that they really hit on that hits the Doctor hardest is the Ood sphere getting dusted. Because, of course, we all love the Ood. Interestingly enough, as it's also brought up, the planets that are being just kind of... Again, the planets aren't being destroyed, just all life on them is being wiped out. Because, God of death. Not God of terraforming. Or planetary destruction. It's not Galactus, it's not eating planets, just wiping out all life on them. So, more hardcore than Thanos. Thanos like, I'll do half. Sutek's like, oh no, we're getting everyone. So, way to one-up Thanos there, Sutekh. Anyway. After that point, missing a point. One of the planets they point out also being dusted is Skaro. So, all the Daleks, potentially. Although not really, because yes, it's their home planet, but Daleks are everywhere in Doctor Who universe all the time. So, yeah. Plus, at this point, it's become clearly obvious, especially once the Earth's all dusted. I'm like, well, this is all gonna, much like with Infinity War, like Endgame Infinity War stuff. Yes, the moments hit, like, in the moment, but at a certain point, it gets so over the top with things. Like, once the whole Earth gets dusted, you're like, okay, so how's this going to get undone? Because we know it's not going to stick. So it loses a little bit of that tension in the episode, just because this ain't going to stick. But I still think that Davies did the best of it writing-wise, because it feels like it's not clear, but it feels like there's a bit of a time jump at this point. Because we find the Doctor and like one other survivor and like the post-apocalyptic, like what traces are left, what tiny few survivors are left. There's a really great scene, honestly. Maybe one of my favorites in the episode, besides the ending, which we'll get to. Again, when the Doctor's sort of just venturing out in the wastelands of what's left of people or life forms, not many. and he's negotiating with this stranger, looking for like any kind of metal or something. I forget how he phrases it, and I think the woman says something like, "All I have is this one spoon." And the doctor has a great line about how I rewrote the quote down. I had to read it again. So I might save the universe with this one spoon, or with this spoon, which I thought was a great piece of, at the time, like, oh, that's great throwaway dialogue set up, like, for, your, like, climax of the story when everything's going wrong. Somehow that spoon is going to fix it. I'm like, cool. Like, I saw the foreshadowing. Not that epic. That spoon thing gets paid off like 30 seconds later. Apparently he just needed some metal to take into the TARDIS to fix the circuit things. That's all the spoon was for. I thought there'd be more to it than that, something a little more ridiculous, like later on. But no, that's the end of that spoon bit. So, there's yet another reference to 73 yards. Didn't write down what the reference was. Doesn't matter. We all need to go watch that episode again and this one, and like, this is, I haven't felt this way in a while as a Doctor Who viewer. It's like, I need to go watch these repeatedly and probably go seek out some YouTube videos. Not mine, by the way, for those. At least not unless I've already compiled a bunch of information and presenting it as that way of like, here's some Easter eggs and fun facts. Like, no, this is just my initial, hey, here's what I thought of the episode, what I think, and stuff. I don't know, like, I'm not the best for like, oh, this is a reference to this thing. I just forget half the time, even though I largely know a lot of that stuff. But a lot of information's floating around here in the brain. Anyway, I don't know what that even says. Really got to work on this. Again, these notes were jotted down really fast. And I can't tell. Oh. Huh. Yeah, I wish I knew what that said, but maybe it's not relevant. Because there's a really great line from the Doctor. I don't have it in quotes, because I don't remember if I bothered to get the exact quote at the time. But when they're on the TARDIS and they're, again, this, basically, because, oh yeah, after he gets the spoon from that woman gets dusted too, for whatever reason. Like, Sutekh just now got to her in that moment, whatever, television. Anyway, the Doctor has a great line when they're on the memory TARDIS, and, or wait, is it the memory TARDIS at that point? Because eventually they do find a way to break Sutekh's hold on the original TARDIS. I think, I can't remember if it's which one of the two, that basically I can't remember, this might happen after the line, so I'll just say the line now. But the Doctor has a great line of, we fought a monster and now I must become a monster. And that's when they rig up the whole thing with a little bit of trickery. I don't know how this works in terms of like even the in-universe physics. No idea. It doesn't really matter. I'll let it go. Where they basically hook up I'll say bungee cord for the sake of it, a big extension line to Sutekh and the TARDIS, and then just start dragging Sutekh through the time vortex. And I don't have it written down, I don't think, here in my notes. Oh yeah, because the whole the fought a monster, now I must become a monster. There's another, again, epic speech sort of thing, question mark, and I have dash, Dr. kills Sutekh, which apparently, maybe, it's not super clear. It is somewhat explained that by dragging Sutekh through the time vortex, it's gonna undo all the stuff that Sutekh did. And there's a line about that, because Sutekh's power was used to kill these people by pulling him through the vortex. Possibly, I would assume, maybe pulling him through the time vortex in the opposite direction. Like, if time flows linearly, normally, if you were able to use the TARDIS to pull Sutekh back through the vortex, like in the reverse direction, maybe you could undo that. That's the best explanation we get. I think it's explained better in the episode, so don't take my word for it. If you want, like, this makes it like you're watching this and like this sounds like it makes no sense. Go watch the episode. It's actually explained about as well as it can be explained, in terms of resolving the whole Sutekh thing and whatnot. Then after that's done, I had it in my notes here. Thankfully, a return to a joke for me, which I haven't done in forever. After the Sutekh stuff is resolved and the major threat of the episode's resolved, feels like things are wrapping up. I expect, maybe a couple of, wrap-up scenes here, and then we'll end the episode, or whatever's going to happen. Maybe they'll tease the Christmas thing. Who knows? I don't know, but it feels like they're wrapping things up for the episode, for the season, blah, blah, blah. It's just a couple little scenes to wrap things up, and then it just kind of keeps going. I eventually put it in my notes, like, this episode has more endings than Return of the King, which is, yeah, if you know, that's a joke by itself. Now, despite having said that, like, it's a negative thing, it's more of a joke. It's actually surprising this episode wrapped up, like, everything, in terms of Ruby's storyline and her mother and family and all of that. Again, they spend a long time. I need to go look at, like, for the episode that ran 57 minutes, I want to see what percentage of that was resolving the Sutekh stuff and what other good chunk of it was, like, these 5,000 endings we get. Again, it does wrap up all of Ruby's storyline, and I do mean all of it, to the point where by the time we get to the end of it, I think Ruby's character arc is done as a companion. I have no idea if Melly Gibson's coming back for season 2. I thought she was, but honestly, after watching this finale and the way it ended, I have my doubts. I could see her popping in once. Maybe it's the Christmas special coming up that Moffat's writing, or sometime in the future is like a cameo thing, or possibly whenever the 15th Doctor is ready to wrap up his run, we could see like a what was it? I don't think it was an End of Time, was it? It might have been. Yeah, it was End of Time, where, like, all the side characters from the Russell T Davies era came together at the end. I could see something similar to that, but that will be years from now, so. Yeah, it did feel like they wrapped up all of Ruby's stuff, all the mystery there, all the things. I was very happy with how they did it and how it was all resolved. Because a lot of what I heard around the Doctor Who, just community chatter, pretty much all season, mostly from people being negative or trying to be negative on the show. Constantly this refrain of, oh, well, Ruby's plotline, all this stuff is just another recycled version of what they did with Rose or what they did with Clara. It turns out, no, not at all. So, well done, Russell T Davies, for shutting all those people up that kept saying that, because I never felt that was the case. So, and hey, I was right. And I gotta make one last note here, because it's technically not a post-credit scene because the credits roll, but it feels like it, because there's like 8,000, there's like 8 endings, and then one more final scene, with the character's name, who I still forget, and it bothers me, but Ruby's neighbor, who's, watching over her grandmother, has one final scene, breaking the fourth wall, talking to the audience about stuff, and it's just, I know that's leading into wherever we're going next with, next season and the future of the show, but I have no idea what she's talking about. It's very cryptic. Like I said, this is an episode I want to go and watch again, and definitely, maybe not the entire, I'm going to watch the entire series again anyway at some point, or season, but with definite extra focus on 73 Yards, because that ends up being very critical to this whole story in terms of the mechanics of how some of the stuff works. Yeah, it was very interesting, and probably another episode I need to go and use some other resources of other people more knowledgeable than me, or teams of people, realistically. They can do the research and see what can be dug up, and yeah, again, a bunch of other people, multiple brains need to come together and look at this episode. I think we'll be talking about this one for a while. It definitely, I'd say 10 out of 10 for the season and for the finale, just because it gives us, as Doctor Who fans, so much to talk about and speculate on for a while. Like this, I think, did a really good job of satisfying a Doctor Who fan's appetite for a season, and keeping us thinking about things and asking questions until we get more story. So overall, that's about as best you can do. Like, I thought the finale was, even the episode before this with The Legend of Ruby Road that set this finale up, I thought was really, really well done, because it wasn't all set up. It paid off stuff that led into this, and then this paid off all the things. So can't really ask for much more than that from a season finale, especially in a show like Doctor Who, which tends to sometimes ask more questions than they answer, which can bug people. And this season really didn't do that. Like, it did bring up a bunch of questions all season, but the last 2 episodes, pretty much everything got answered. 2 things I found interesting. These are 2 minor notes, and then I'll wrap this up. When all these planets are being dusted and life's being destroyed on them, no mention of Gallifrey. I believe that's probably because in the current timeline, like, not like there's different timelines in Doctor Who, there's not, per se. But in the current chronology of the show, better way to put that, like where we're at in time in the show, relative to everything else, I think, if I remember correctly from stuff that happened during the 13th Doctor era, I think Gallifrey might already have been wiped out in terms of, like, the planet's still there, but I don't know if anyone's still alive on Gallifrey, so that might have been why they skipped that one, but it was just caught me a little odd. The other thing I thought was a little strange too, so when they were talking about some of the Sutekh stuff, and they do show, like, at the unit monitors, one of the little stills of the Tom Baker Doctor, 4th Doctor, and Sarah Jane Smith in I think from the Pyramid to Marios episodes. I believe Sarah Jane's companion in that episode. I could be wrong, but I believe that's who it is. When Ruby starts asking questions about who those 2 people in that still are, like the guy with the hair, I forgot she refers to them though. Either refers to him as the guy with the scarf or with the curly hair, one of the 2, and the other person with them. And the Doctor only addresses the Sarah Jane in the room about, although she used to travel with, I forget what he says, how he passed off, but he doesn't acknowledge that was him. Like, he doesn't point, you would think, like, this is a classic Doctor Who thing. It's kind of been a running joke for a long time with the regenerations about, oh yeah, that used to be me, like, that kind of stuff. Yeah, that was shockingly absent, and I'm not sure why. I don't know if it was intentional. If it was intentional, that raises all new questions. It may have been unintentional. It may have been in there and something that just got cut. Not for time, because we're in the streaming world where this can be a 57-minute episode, so time isn't a big deal. It may have been cut for pacing. Still seems like a weird omission to me, though. Something that stands out. I don't know if there's anything more to that or not, but it does make me wonder. It was very odd. So those are some little quirks I noticed. I'm sure other people have caught other things. I need to still go do my rounds on some other video reviews and catch-ups and little Easter egg things, so I'll have a little more knowledge. So sure, I'll come back, and before we do the Christmas special in December, I'll probably take another look at this entire season. So just to see, with a little more knowledge filled in with other people, and then knowing the bigger picture overall, we'll see how it looks. But yeah, that's it for now. And that's it for Doctor Who for most of the rest of the year until Christmas. So I'll see you then. Happy holidays. Peace.